And so let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. And just take a few moments to arrive. And feel that you are grounded into your seat. And feel that the spine is tall. And feel that the breath is flowing. And allow the body to feel strong and stable, but also calm and joyful. Allow the body to feel stability, but contentment. And then paying attention to the breath, just notice the qualities of your breathing. Notice if your breath is flowing smoothly, if it's interrupted, if it's challenged. And don't judge what it is that you experience. Simply meet it where it's at. Recognize the breath as God approaching you, as the divinity, the goddess coming to you, giving you the gift of life, and receive it with gratitude. Have a clear understanding that your breath carries the life force, the prana, that your breath carries the essence of that gift of being. And if there is a challenge to the breathing, if there is instability in the breathing, then the reason that it's there is because there's something to learn from it. There's something to learn. So being open to learning, being open to paying attention on purpose, being open to the gift of being. And place our right hand on the heart and our left hand over the right. And together we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. Bowing the head with a sense of humbleness, acknowledging yourself, your connection to all things everywhere. And then draw the face back to center and release the hands. And welcome. So happy to see each and every one of you. Wonderful. Today's conversation is going to be about spring cleaning. How many of you have started? You know, the weather gets to a certain point, like maybe 57 to 60 degrees, and the smell that is in the air, I don't know, it's enticing. You know, it compels us to want to do something, to want to clean our quarters. And so we start ripping our closets apart and tossing out the things that we haven't worn in a while or that we decided we don't really like after all, you know. We start to reorganize the dish cabinet, scrub the floors, do all kinds of amazing projects that we put off in the quieter months. And then we stand back at the end of it all and we feel really good. We feel really good. But typically that good feeling is temporary. It lasts only as long as there are no distractions. And then the moment that a distraction comes, ultimately, we forget about the good work that we've just done. And we become lost in the distraction instead. Cleaning. Cleaning our material environment is important. Absolutely. And that joy that we feel when we have acquired a clean space, a clean, organized space, is also really important. And it's our way of communing with the spring energies. But what we can ask ourselves as spiritualists is, why does it have to be so short-lived? Why is it that I spend all day Monday taking care of all these things and maybe a part of Tuesday, and by Wednesday, it's all back again? What happens? Where does it all come from? Because there's a second part to spring cleaning that most people don't pay much attention to, because we don't really even realize it. But spring cleaning is not only a time to clean out your closets, it's also a time to clean out yourself. It's a time to clean out the body and the mind and the emotions. Spring is a time to recognize one's own resilience and one's own inner abundance, and take the opportunity to set down a very strong foundation so that the joy that is experienced in any given moment can perhaps last a little bit longer. And when a distraction does come along, that the distraction is not overpowering your inner peace, that the distraction is recognized for what it is, interacted with as it needs to be appropriately, and then let go of. Never losing our joy, or seldomly losing our joy. But how do we do that? How do we marry these two things together? How do we begin to clean ourselves out in springtime? Well, we have a body, we have a mind, and we have an emotional self. And cleaning out means attending to. So attending to the physical body, attending to the mental body, attending to the emotional body, attending to the things in life that seem out of balance. And if things in life seem out of balance, then they need attending to. And no matter how many times we clean out our physical closet of our clothing and the things that we've been collecting for years, unless we attend to this, then that attention will only ever be part of what it could be. So in interacting with your local environment in a way that maintains such beauty and such cleanliness and such order and such inspiration, and then avoiding attending to oneself, that's disharmony, and that breeds more contention. So we need to bring it in to ourselves and say, okay, so there are some things in my closet that can get donated, which is wonderful. But now, how often do I donate? How often do I serve? How often do I support others? How often am I kind? How often am I ridiculing myself? How often am I harmful? And taking a look at those tendencies, honestly, taking a look at those tendencies, and then making adjustments in our attitudes wherever we can, so that cleaning out our clothing closet becomes even more of a joy, because it's not the only burden that's being lifted. The other burden that's being lifted is the burden we carry right here, the self-judgment, the critical nature, the guilt over the harm that we've committed. It seems kind of obvious, that this should be a focus this time of year, that taking a really beautiful look at ourselves and acknowledging that some things can stay and some things need to change. It's not just this time of the year. It's all year. It's every day. It's 24/7 during the waking hours. Yeah, we need to sleep sometimes, get a little rest. I know. This spiritual path is hard work. But it is a practice that we must be involved in and invested in if, in fact, we're going to manifest the world that we wish to see and live in. I'm going to read to you a couple of scriptures from a couple of different traditions now that talk about this spring cleaning, spiritually speaking, because all traditions talk about it. They don't use the term spring cleaning, but they do say that in order to realize the relationship with unity, the relationship with your chosen traditional deity, whether that be Christ or Mohammed or Krishna or Durga, to have a truer and more reverent relationship with yourself, that these are things, this cleaning out is something that has to happen. And it needs to happen pretty continually. So we can start with looking at Psalm 51:10. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. What is a clean heart? It's the first one on the list. It's like the first is cleanse the heart, then cleanse the language, and then we come to strengthen your resolve, clean up your behavior, release bitterness and resentment, and then deepen faith. But cleanse the heart is first. And why would that be? Because if the heart is not set right, then everything else that we do will be tainted. It doesn't mean that everything else that we do will be meaningless. That's not the same thing. It just means that we will not derive the same type of joy and joyful peace, a guiltless state of being, because the heart is still heavy with something else that it's carrying. So we can still commit great acts of kindness, but they will be overshadowed by whatever burden the heart is currently dealing with. So until we come into right relationship with our heart, then our acts of kindness, our acts of service, our acts of faith will only be a small part of the potential that they actually are. Once we come into a clearer relationship with our own heart, and we acknowledge that we are not bad people, we are not condemned, we are not worthless, that we have value, that we are here for a reason, that we're walking a path that is not based on success or failure. The path that we are walking is based on how connected we are. And that is a very complicated topic. That has nothing to do with success or failure. It has to do with presence. It has to do with being available to have the experience, to sit with the experience, to have compassion, to have clarity, to be open in the mind, to learning, to changing. And when we have that as we're walking through life, the heart becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. Because the more invested we are in learning what it is that we are here to learn, the more invested we are in having right relationship with our own heart, the less invested we are in harm, either of ourselves or others. The more we realize the truth of our own suffering, the more we realize the truth of everybody's suffering. And then, inherently, we do not wish to contribute to that suffering. So we stop, and we come into an intimate connection with our own heart that sees very clearly the suffering that happens in this world. And we hold it, a space for that, a space of compassion and empathy. And we make a conscious decision to not contribute to it. We will be a support. We'll be of service in whatever way we can. But we will not act in service of hate or separation or further suffering. When we come to that place of acknowledging, truthfully and honestly, the impact of our own actions, whether those actions are violent or not violent, then we come into right relationship with the heart. Because the heart does not want to invest in violence. The heart doesn't want to invest in more suffering. The heart wishes to invest in health and healing and love. That's its nature. The physical heart as well as the spiritual heart. And I'm sure you've all heard, science somewhere along the way, and perhaps, some spiritual teachers also talk about how, the heartache can be so heavy in a person as to cause the heart to stop functioning appropriately and possibly at all. The heartache, the heaviness, the guilt, the anger can become so heavy within a person that it can actually stop the physiological function of the heart. That's pretty intense. But here's the beautiful part. If you chose to focus on that heaviness, you can also choose to focus on the lightness. And what science has also found is that with just a little bit of time every day, attending to one's mental state through meditation and concentration, through chanting, through a yoga practice or Tai Chi or Qigong, one of these practices that attends to your self-relationship, that burden is lifted and the heart begins to make its way back toward a healthier state. Now, of course, the degree that happens depends on a lot of things. So I'm not saying that yoga is a cure-all, but I will say that yoga heals all. And it does. Because healing and curing are two different things. Curing is a medical thing. You know, how do I get my pulse to be just right? How do I get my blood pressure to be 110/70? How do I do this? How do I, lose weight? How do I gain weight? How do I regulate the functions of the body? How do I obliterate cancer? How do I, become cured of some disease? And yoga and all these other techniques can support that process, but they're not cure-alls. They will heal you, though. And what healing is a sense of right relationship within the heart, that even though this may not be what we prefer, that in this moment it is what we are dealing with. So let's deal with it with grace. Let's deal with it with compassion, with kindness. Let's look for a solution and not become completely consumed within the idea of the problem only. Does that make sense? Yeah. For cleansing your heart, we also see in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a scripture of yoga, chapter 4, verse 10, Krishna tells Arjuna, keep the temple of your heart clean if you wish to experience the presence within. So simple. Keep the heart clean if you wish to experience the presence. Now, I don't know what tradition you all belong to, but think about your own tradition and where it tells you that very same thing. That if you wish to have a relationship with Christ, with Allah, with Yahweh, with Krishna, with Shiva, with Durga, with the goddess, with nature, with anything, with love, the cleaner you are here, the more intimate that relationship will become. The clearer you are in your heart, the more accessible you are, the more present you are to all the gifts that wishes to bestow on you. And it does wish to bestow gifts on you because that's the nature of the universe, and that is the nature of oneness, is the bestowing of abundance. But in order to see the abundance, to recognize the abundance, we need to be clear, or at least working toward greater clarity. We can see a little bit at a time, So this is not work that you do overnight or in an hour. You can have great insights in an hour, unless, of course, you come to yoga class. But sometimes in yoga class, I love when new students come. And I'm sure, Jeanette, that you've had this experience too. A new student comes into class, and they've never practiced yoga before. And they're a little weary, And at the end of class, they're like, their eyes are big, and they're looking around, and they're like, wow, it's all so clear. And then they walk out the door, excuse me, and into the world. And as they're getting in their car, their phone rings. And you see their stature go from a very beautiful alignment to, because the distraction came in. Excuse me. And while they had this beautiful, beautiful experience within the yoga of what the potential of their heart is, they did not, in that 1 hour, acquire the skills necessary to maintain a relationship with it. And that's why they must come back or continue on in whatever way they're meant to. So relationship with the heart. In the Quran, 39:23, it states, their hearts relax at the remembrance of Allah. Now, in the yoga tradition, we say a name is a name, and that the one has many names, and that in the yoga tradition, you can call it that Allah, you can call it Christ, you can call it Shiva, that it's the same. And there is no difference between what one person considers their God and what another person considers their God. That it is the same God appearing differently to different people because of what they need. That is a great compassion. That essence would appear to one person the way it is needed. So whatever your tradition is, does your heart not relax the moment that you consider your deity, whether it be your deity's name, whether it be Christ or Shiva? The moment that you start thinking of that, a softness comes over the self. And that softness is more and more profound as the heart is more and more purified. So if the heart is heavy with guilt, then that experience of relaxation is going to be kind of tough to acquire, because we feel like we're not worth it. We're not worthy of it. We have a tendency to be very hard on ourselves when the heart is filled with guilt. How do you alleviate guilt from the heart? Stop behaving in ways that cause it. It's so straightforward. Well, in what ways do we behave that cause guilt? Some are very obvious. Some are not. So go by one general rule. And that general guideline, we'll say, because we don't have rules, we have guidelines. Harm none. Harm none. In word, action, or thought, harm none. And if you harm none, you have nothing to feel guilty about. And then you can live the life that you wish to live. The life of happiness, the life of joy, the life of balance. But if you harm even one, you will feel lack and you will feel guilt. Dr. Jeff teaches nonviolent communication, and he'll be doing a program here in the future on that very topic. And nonviolent communication is meant to support people in their journey toward purifying their heart of guilt through speaking. The power of speech, so strong. Everything we say has such powerful meaning. Many times when I sit up here, most times, if not all the time, it really is a flow of consciousness. I do not call myself a channel, but it's a flow of consciousness. And most of the time, somebody will come up to me later and say, could you repeat what you said? I'm like, yeah, I really can't, And I know the difference between when I'm open to that grace flowing and when it is my ego talking. And you know how? Because my words, the things that I say, they're not as clear when I'm not in a place of deep, deep faith and presence. When I'm in a place of being worried about something. I don't have to be worried about what I'm saying necessarily, but if I'm even distracted about what's going on in the next room, then suddenly I'm drawn away from that natural flow and into a place where mistakes happen. Words are said that weren't meant, and they can be interpreted incorrectly. So we always have to be thinking about that, We should always be thinking, if I say this, how will it be received? Does it actually transmit the message that I'm intending with my heart? And so your ego says, well, yeah, you're going to tell them the way it is. You're going to give them a good piece of your mind. And then you go, heart, is that really what you want? And the heart goes, no. No. Try again. So the ego takes another round about it and it goes, well, okay, so I'll be compassionate then. And I'll just tell them what I think is helpful to them. What I think they need to do to fix themselves. And you look at the heart and say, heart, is that what you want? And the heart goes, no, not at all. So the ego comes at it from yet another direction, and another direction, and another direction, and it keeps trying to trick us into acting violently through this idea that we could possibly fix someone else when we haven't even attended to our own closet yet. So at some point, if we are consistent in our practices, whatever those practices may be, whether they're prayer, posture, meditation, at some point, the heart says, just tell them that you love them. That's all that needs to be said. And tell them how you feel, not about how they make you feel. And tell them that you don't want to be harmful. So you're choosing your words very carefully, and you hope that they're not misunderstood. And then again, tell them that you love them, because that's all that really matters. And that can be hard. But each one of us is on a path of spirituality. Each one of us is on a path of spiritual growth. And sometimes those paths are pretty crazy. Sometimes things happen that we're like, I don't get it. I do everything right. Why is this happening to me? It is not happening to you. You are a participant in a relationship with your heart. You're a participant in a relationship with yourself. You're a participant in a relationship with the world. You're a participant in a relationship with the divine. And whatever is coming to you is that divinity approaching you and saying, have a relationship with me. Have a relationship with me. The second is cleanse your language, which is exactly what we're talking about. So cleanse your language. In Philippians 2:14, it says, do everything without complaining or arguing. Can you even imagine? Like, think about your coworker right now. You know, the one who comes in and just cannot be happy with anything that's happening. I used to work with someone like that who I sat right next to. And, oh my goodness, it's such a heavy burden to have to complain about everything, you know? And I used to sit and try to cheer her up. I would try to fix her, you know, and tell her, well, you know, you could look at it this way, or you could look at it this way. She always had an excuse. Always had an excuse. No, they do this on purpose. They just don't want me to be happy. I don't really think they care about your happiness. I think they just want you to do the work that has to be done, you know? I don't think they're that invested in you as a person. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's part of the problem, right? But also the reality of it is, you know, you're there to do a job. You're there to do a job on the one side of it. You're there to do a job. You chose the job. No one put anything, you know, gun to your head and told you got to be here. You chose that. So what is the job? Is it just a 9-to-5 situation where you pick up your paycheck on Friday and then go do what you're going to do for the weekend? Just so that you can, you know, really not look forward to Monday morning at 9 o'clock again? Or is your job part of your spiritual path in that every single thing you do and every single thing you encounter in your life is the divine approaching you? Your boss is the divine approaching you. Your coworker, the work on your desk. Can you commit to that work as a service instead of moving into the place of complaining and arguing? Can you move into whatever work it is that you do as a service to the community that it is involving, as a service to the divine? Yes, I can sit here and I can do this paperwork that might otherwise be considered tedious in a way that feels the creative flow of what we call Shakti in yoga, the creative flow of the universe. There's something very beautiful about putting a pen to paper, don't you think? It writes. It's like, you know, it flows. And then you can write words. And those words that you write on that legal document or that doctor's note or that whatever it is that you're writing on, those words have an energy that you have just infused into them. And there's a scientist, he's no longer alive, but in Japan, who did this beautiful experiment with water. Are you all familiar with that? The water experiments. And what he did was he wrote words on a piece of paper. He wrote words like hate, curses, garbage. And then he wrote words like love and grace and peace and God bless you. And he put these words, he kind of taped them onto these little cylinders that had crystallizing water in them. And the little cylinders that had like the curses and the word hate and, you're no good, you're garbage written on them, they didn't crystallize very nicely. They actually kind of looked like distorted. There was no continuity to them. There was no beautiful patterning to them. They were not like the snowflakes that fall from the heavens, They were very off, and you could see it by looking at them. The other group that had the words like love, grace, God bless you, I love you written on them, they had beautiful, beautiful patterning in their crystallization. Beautiful patterning. And much more consistency in the patterning. And then there was a third group. And the third group were ignored. There was nothing written on them at all. They just kind of stayed over there. Nobody ever went by them. They ignored them on purpose. And they looked like vomit. Just look up the water experiments, and you'll find water crystallization experiments. That is the power of the words that you write on the paper every time you sign your name. Because what you're actually signing is your energy. And you're saying, so I'm putting my energy into this pen or pencil, and I'm signing or writing, and I'm putting that energy through this pen or pencil into that. And then someone else is going to come and pick up that paper and touch that energy. And you are transferring your intention into that document, which is going to go to the next person. Science just also released, or somebody released, a recent research that said, and by the way, the yogis were right all along. When you hug someone, you do leave a trace of your energy in their energetic field. You do. They can measure this now using scientific equipment, that when you shake hands, when you brush by somebody, when they have an interaction with you, even if you don't physically touch each other, that your auras are still interacting with each other, and you actually leave a little bit of yourself with them. Knowing that, would you not want to leave them the gift of joy and peace and healing? So cleaning up our language, our internal language, our external language, not complaining, not arguing. Matthew 15:11 says, "It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person." So be mindful about what you allow to come out of your mouth, and then also be mindful about the thoughts that you indulge in, because they're just as powerful as words. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature or the scripture of your choice, the uplifted writing of your choice. Don't be, reading Slaughterhouse-Five, because that's a certain energy. Instead, read, the beautiful writings of Rumi, who talks about love, of the scripture, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, the Quran, whatever it happens to be for you. Read that so that you can come to a deeper understanding of your relationship to that. These 5, truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and necessary. Is it necessary? Is it necessary to say these things? Or are we just spewing words because we're bored? So it's important to know, because everything we say, everything we do, and everything we think has an impact. And if we want to come to this place of a more purified heart, then we need to attend to the mouth for sure. To the mouth, for sure. In the Torah, in Leviticus 25:17, he says, "You shall not wrong one another." And this is typically looked at as being associated with speech. And here's a few examples. Do not call a person derogatory names or nicknames, even if he says he doesn't mind, or if you think he doesn't mind. So, you see Joe at the store, and you've got this little pet name for Joe at the store that may have a little negative connotation to it, but you both laugh, and so you think it's harmless. It's actually not harmless. It's not harmless at all, because every time you say that, his ego, without him even knowing about it, his emotion, without him even knowing about it, and his energetics, without him even knowing about it, are being assailed. So next time you see Joe, say something else. Say, "Joe, I'm so happy to see you today just as you are. So happy." And leave it be at that. Do not ask an uneducated person for an opinion on a matter beyond their understanding, because it causes a sense of negative humility. It causes embarrassment. When you sit and ask somebody, "Well, here, you answer this really tough math question. I don't know, we're having this argument. You answer this question." And the person is like, "Well, I don't really know. I'm not very good at math." And then they're compelled, because of the ego, to say something like, "I'm not really very good at math." And then they feel they have to justify that. So they start explaining. And the more they explain, the more poorly they feel about themselves. So don't ask people questions that are beyond their understanding. And particularly in a way that is meant to embarrass. Particularly. Do not ask how much somebody would sell something for if you have no intention of buying it. I love that one. It's just like, yeah, because people do that all the time. They get into conversations about, "Well, what do you think your car is worth? Like, if you were going to sell that, what would you sell it for?" Because then the person's going to say, "Well, so maybe I'd sell it for $7,000. Really? That's all? That's all you think that car is worth? Or they'll say, "Wow, that's a lot of money. This person must be greedy." So based on whatever they answer you, you're going to have either they're an idiot who doesn't know the value of a thing, or they're greedy and they're trying to get more money. So we will attend to a subconscious opinion of a person based on those types of questions. So be mindful about that, what you're asking people. You know what you can ask somebody? You can ask somebody more of a statement than anything. "I hope someone has been kind to you today. I hope you have been kind to someone. Period. I love you. Period." You don't need to ask those other types of questions that are just kind of a quicksand, a pitfall full of obstacles. Don't ask people for assistance if you know they cannot give you assistance. That's another one. And then finally, do not deceive anyone, even if seemingly harmless. Sometimes people like to play jokes on other people. And those jokes can go awry and cause some harm that you may never know about. Particularly because we don't know the traumas that other people carry. But we know people carry trauma. All people. Not just people who have been raped, not just people who were, abused as a child, not just people who have lost everything and become homeless. All people carry trauma. All people. And so pranks are, in many moments, a form of violence that emphasizes the trauma and obfuscates the peace. Takes away the potential of a person in a moment of happiness, and they succumb to fear or dread or anger or frustration. And then we say, "Well, I don't know why you're so angry. It was just a joke. You should get yourself together." Well, every time you point your finger that way, there's 3 more pointing back at you. I should get myself together and stop doing such things because I instigated that. Yeah. Important stuff in this spring cleaning, Very important. So it kind of makes the closet look like an easy task, doesn't it? Yeah. It's like, I'm going to go home and clean my closet now. Yeah. The next one we come to is strengthen your resolve. And we can look here and say in Romans 12:2 it states, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by renewing your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve that God's will is his good, pleasing, and perfect will. We could term that another way and say, when I come into a consistent, grounded spiritual practice, where my mind is opening, my heart is being cleared in process, and I'm able to hold space for myself and to hold space for others, then I also begin to see that there is actually a lot of space out there. There's a lot of space. And there's a lot of natural process happening. There's storms. There's birth, maintenance, and death. There's approach and retreat. There's many different natural processes going on that typically we're very unaware of. And every single one of those processes has consequence to us. On a level that we know, on a level that we kind of know, and on a level that we don't know at all. Somebody gets up to walk out to go to the bathroom, and the speaker thinks, are they leaving? Did they not like the talk? Yeah. A child runs into the room laughing, and the speaker thinks, oh, they don't have any respect. But they don't hold on to that thought in the front of their mind. They hold it here. And then they carry it with them, and it becomes so burdensome. But for the person who has an established spiritual practice, what we call in yoga a sadhana, where it is, pretty much all day, every day, or at least a good amount of the time, where they're constantly self-studying, they're constantly studying scripture, they're constantly breathing and practicing awareness. The person who gets up to go out of the room is getting up to go out of the room. It's none of my business why. The child who comes into the room laughing, be grateful for their laughter. Otherwise, it's none of my business. And we become more capable of attending to what is right in front of us, the task at hand, what we are doing. And that develops willpower. It develops a strong will to continue on the path of healing rather than become lost again into the path of distraction and unrealized assaults and assailings. Does that make sense? Yeah. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, Krishna states, for he who has controlled his mind, self is his best relation. But for he who has not, self is the enemy. Nobody outside of you is your enemy. The only enemy that you and I have is ourself, when we are not in right relationship to it. When we are not in right relationship with ourself, with our heart, with the divine, which is part of ourself, then we cannot be in right relationship with others. There will always be something off. And we will always find something to complain about, to argue about, to second guess about. We will always find a reason to joke around out of nervousness and uncertainty, to either advance or retreat out of fear. Always. It's only when we come into right relationship with ourselves, when we befriend ourselves, that we are then capable of truly befriending others in a way that has no expectation and in a way that simply holds space. And when we can hold space for ourselves that way, then we can hold space not only for the people who we call friend, but for all people we come into contact with. I mean, think about that. That you don't see anybody as a threat. You don't see anybody as, targeting you specifically. Instead, what you recognize is that that other person is in process, just like you are in process. And that process is going to bring both of you where you are meant to be, without exception. Without exception. And sometimes that's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, because we really like being right. We enjoy that. It's like, yay, I'm right. But here's the harm. If you are right, that means someone else must be wrong. So the moment that you take some type of award for being right, you're putting somebody else down as being wrong. And that's not correct. Because if someone else is wrong, then we are all contributing to it through our lack of appropriate relationship to ourselves. Does that make sense? Yeah? So these three are really important, and this cleansing the heart, cleansing language, and then strengthening our resolve, and they bring us into cleansing our behavior. And when we're working on these other three, that kind of happens naturally, where we start to see habitual patterns of harmful behavior start to fall away. It's like, yeah, I don't really want to go to the bar again tonight. Thank you, but no. I think I'm going to sit home and have some tea or just play Scrabble or something, Or maybe, you're tired after a long week of work and you're like, I really don't know if I'm up to running a 25-mile marathon this weekend. I feel like my body is a bit out of sorts. And maybe you opt instead to take care of yourself instead of going and running the 3rd marathon this month. We look at these things in life that are coming to us as the divine approaching us. And the more that we are working on these first three, and then, as a result of that, also focusing on the second three, the more of a right relationship we're coming into, the more of a correct relationship, a loving relationship, an abundant relationship, versus one based in lack. And well, I guess I have to go do that marathon, or people are going to be like, well, she didn't show up, and then telling stories. Who cares what anybody says about you? It's none of our business what they say. Let them say what they will. Let them say what they will. It matters not. It doesn't. It doesn't matter if they call you a thief. It doesn't matter. Because remember, every time that we do this, there are 3 other fingers pointing back at this. And so what they're actually saying is, I'm a thief. I'm a thief, and your behavior is reminding me of how much of a thief I am. Yeah. There are many ways to be a thief, by the way. It's not just stealing something that doesn't belong to you, like a chair or a jewelry piece. It's also time. It's also energy. You can steal energy. You can steal time. You can steal love. You can steal attention. Yeah. So cleaning up behavior, our habits, and that's part of the practice of svadhyaya, which is self-study. And the self-study is looking at oneself compassionately while holding that beautiful space and allowing ourselves to see honestly, well, that could really be kind of harmful. So I think maybe I'll think about taking another tact, looking at it another way. How does this experience right now support my greater relationship with myself, with the divine? How do I manifest that here? And I dare you to try that. Next time that you're about to get into a heated argument, ask yourself, if this is really God coming to me, or the goddess coming to me, or the divine coming to me, they're approaching me in a really interesting way. How do I embrace the most beautiful and love-based relationship here, now? And then give yourself the opportunity to explore that and what that means. Put yourself onto the altar. Your life, your actions, your love, your heart onto the altar. Allow yourself to be the offering. And move away from the ego a little bit more. A little bit at a time. Can't do it all in one day. It's a little bit at a time. But start looking at it and, catching yourself. And when you catch yourself, don't be like, oh man, I did it again. I really suck. No. You catch yourself doing something and you say, that is a habitual behavior that has been in place for a very long time, and I'm open to changing it. So please empower me to do so. That's all you ever need to say, and you'll be empowered to do so. Release bitterness and resentment. And that's really important. Bitterness, Mataji Joyce, who was the founder of Ashtanga Yoga, Western Ashtanga Yoga, not Eastern, but he's from that family, he's from that lineage. And he was talking on the kosha, the kleshas, and he called them the 5 poisons of the heart, and bitterness is the worst one. Bitterness is a poison of the heart. So as long as we feel bitter about things, our heart is not pure. Because bitterness will drive us into a harmful state of existence. We need to look at the bitterness, acknowledge the bitterness, and address it in an open and honest way, but in a way that relates to your own healing first. And by that I don't mean, you made me feel this way. This bitterness is your fault, and now I am stuck with working with this. No. There was an interaction, and the way I chose to go in that interaction caused me to feel an amazing amount of bitterness that I am having difficulty letting go of. And while your action is what I perceive to be incorrect and harmful, it was absolutely my choice what to do with it. We can always walk away in peace. Thich Nhat Hanh. Peace in every step. Peace in every step. We do not need to stay, but we also do not need to leave angry. We do not need to stay, but we do not need to leave angry. Deepen your faith in God, Goddess, abundance, love, and unity. Whatever it is for you to have faith, to deepen that faith, to work with that faith, have a daily practice. Pray at your meals. Be grateful for them. Prayer, some people look and say, well, I don't want to pray. I'm not a religious person. Prayer is not religious. It can be if you're so called to it. But prayer is gratitude. Prayer is the expression of gratitude. And if the expression of gratitude is religion, then hey, I'm all about it. Because I would rather express gratitude than not. Because whenever I do not express gratitude, I find that I end up in a little bit of a wallowing place. Like a fish out of water, looking for something. And, you ever see like a little cartoon with that little goldfish that jumps out of the water bowl and it's like flapping all over? And some nice person comes and puts it back. Or the cat gets it, one or the other, But I don't want to be that fish, particularly if the cat gets it, If it's the one where the hand comes down and puts it back in the water, I'm good with that. That's very human. But I don't want to be consumed by my greatest fear, and the greatest fear of a fish is a cat. And what is our greatest fear? Our own ability to harm. Hatred. Death and dying. And I don't wish to be consumed by that fear. So instead, I'll be grateful. Because where you have gratitude, there's not that much room left for the others. It overwrites them. Because they're opposites of one another. And just like a quarter, you can only ever look at one side at a time. You can only ever play one at a time, too. You can only ever be grateful or you're not grateful. You are in love or you are not in love. You are with grace or you are not with grace. And there's many levels of in between. But if we're talking about healing, and healing is a big thing, then you are either with it or you are not with it. You are either in the process of deep healing or you're not. And if we are still making excuses for ourselves about not cleaning out our clothes closet and, even more importantly, not cleaning out this closet, then we're not with healing. We're with something else. We're with suffering. So for today, the takeaway would be, don't be with the suffering. If you need to feel grief, feel grief. Name it. Be with it. Cry. It's very healthy. Acknowledge your sadness. Acknowledge your frustration. Acknowledge what you feel. But don't put it off on other people. Acknowledge that that's your path that you're walking right now. It's your responsibility to walk that path and not blame it on anybody else. So if you are meant to feel grief, then feel the grief. And then go into the heart and say, heart, I'm not so sure I have the skill for this. Can you help me out? Can you show me how to befriend this that I don't want to befriend? Can you show me how to love this that I don't want to love? And can you show me how to accept what I don't want to accept? And then listen. And listen for the answer. And the answer will not come in words. It will come in feelings. And it will come in absence of feelings. But it will not come in words, necessarily. You'll put words to the feelings. And then you'll ask for clarification of the words. Because words are only ever part of the story, you know. But if you can sit with the feeling of contentment within yourself, the feeling of peace within yourself, then you'll have all the answers that you need. So I will stop there and ask if you have any questions or any thoughts or anything that you would like to share. Yes?
What's the easiest way to stay present? Because I always had this just trouble with being present. Like even today, hiking here, such a beautiful day, I would just look out and just try to be present. And I always had this trouble, just thoughts just running at me. And I'm like, I'm trying to tell myself, like, be here, just enjoy it.
It's a beautiful question, and it's a human question. And it's one that every single person in this room struggles with, all of us. And what I have found is that naming what you are experiencing is being present. So let's just say that you're walking up the hill, and it's getting a bit challenging because you have a backpack on, like you had on. And you can go two routes with that. You can either go the complaining, argumentative route about, oh my gosh, why did I even think about doing this? This is so hard. What was I thinking? Or you can go the other route and name what you feel. I'm feeling fatigued in this moment. How do I overcome fatigue? Stop and breathe. I'm feeling distracted in this moment. Thinking about yesterday or the day before or last week. I am not present in this moment. How do you become present? Stop and breathe. I'm feeling anticipation. I can't wait to get where I'm going to. Just want to get there. Just want to get there. But wait, I'm not present if I can't wait to get there because I'm here. So how do I become present? Stop and breathe. My heart is uncomfortable because it's beating so fast because I'm exerting so much energy and I'm really freaking hungry. And why can't there be a little cafe right here that I can get a little something to eat at? Complaining. Stop and breathe. So the quickest way to move a little bit, it's not going to go away completely.
Yes.
You know, it won't go away. It won't even go away 50%. But it'll go away just enough that space will open up within you. Just keep bringing yourself back to your breath and back to naming what it is that you are feeling right now. Even if like frustration. So rather than the complaining, I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed. You know, I feel I feel. Dr. Jeff can talk a lot about that, the feelings. He's got a whole beautiful chart of feelings. So naming the feeling and then breathing with the feeling, paying attention to it. And it may take you a little longer to get here, because most of us would be stopping every few seconds. But that's okay, because it's not about the destination, it's the journey. Right? It's not the destination. It's the path that you're walking on that matters most. It's a great question. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, Anne-Marie.
Do you have a practical, feeling, if you're just feeling very burdened, if your heart feels very sorrowful, or you feel this suffering, that's kind of there in your heart when you're examining it? Do you have a kind of a practical way at that point in time when you're really examining your heart, just to how to overcome that? Is it forgiveness, or is it?
Well, it could be forgiveness, but forgiveness is kind of the last step, and everything has steps and stages to it. And oftentimes we don't really have the skills to immediately forgive. There's something else that needs to be worked through first. So what needs to be worked through first? What needs to be worked through first is understanding what it is that you're sitting with. Is this grief that I'm feeling? And if it is grief, where is it coming from? Let me stop and breathe and investigate that for a moment. And then if you recognize that it's grief that you're working with, then hold a space for the grief and allow it to be there, because it's not there for no reason. It's there for a reason. So you hold the space for the grief, and you acknowledge that I am the one experiencing this grief. This is my relationship with this emotion. I don't mean any harm to you. I don't want you to go away. But what I hope for you is that you evolve into your highest state of being, and I will support you in any way I can. Because grief is not just a non-entity. Grief has a life to it, and it wants to be honored. Just like anger has a life to it, and it also wants to be honored. But you don't honor anger when you run up to somebody and get in their face and say, "This is your fault. I don't believe what you did." That's not honoring your anger. That's empowering your ego. To honor your anger is to sit with your anger, and something along the lines of, let me sit with this, let me name this, let me look at what the root cause of this is. And maybe the root cause of this is not even that person that aggravated you, but it's somebody else 15 years ago who did something that you ended up losing trust over. That you decided, well, because of this situation, I can no longer trust. And now here comes, Joe. We like to use that name around here for some reason. Here comes Joe. And he doesn't even know what he's doing. But whatever it is, his characteristic, his quality, his body language reminded you subconsciously of 10, 12 years ago. And now all of a sudden you don't trust Joe either. And so sitting with that and saying, well, okay, so if this comes from something else in the past, am I in a point where I can forgive and resolve myself? Yeah, it's helpful to forgive the other person also, but the reality is that no matter what it was that happened to you, no matter how you see that story, forgiveness of self is of the utmost importance. It's even more important than forgiving the other. Because the first thing we will ask ourselves if we have been abused is, why did I let that happen? The second thing that we will ask ourselves is, why am I not strong enough? Why am I such a weak person? And we'll start insulting ourselves. And insulting ourselves goes very deeply because we have to live with those words. They're not moving out through the ether somewhere and some part touching one and some part touching another. No, they reside here. And since those words reside here within me, I need to forgive me first in order to be able to forgive anyone else. If I just try to work to forgive you and I haven't forgiven myself yet, that's going to be a really tricky, slippery slope. Absolutely. So sit with what it is, name what it is, work to get to the root, and know that that's not going to happen in a day for most people. For 99.999%, there's always the outlier, where they're like, oh, I know exactly where it's from. But then the work that follows after that inevitably takes time, because you're talking about rewriting long embedded patterns of behavior and adopting a new story, a more uplifting story, a kinder story, a more inclusive story, and then accepting that as the truth instead of the other story that you're working to let go of. And in that process, coming to love yourself. And people say, can I forgive myself? I say, can you love yourself? If you love yourself, you have forgiven yourself. So the word forgive for some people is a very powerful word. But when we forgive, it's associated with a wrongdoing. And again, that word wrong is just so harsh. So instead, can you love yourself? What do you need to do to love yourself? To really, honestly love yourself. To love yourself. And in that love, you will find forgiveness. But you will not find forgiveness without it. No, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. Yes?
What do you do with somebody who, if I acknowledge my roommate's pain, she feels less pain and does nothing? Like, am I compassionate by acknowledging it because that gives her less pain? Or do I ignore it because then she feels more motivated to do things? Like, I don't know which is more compassionate.
So let's look at the water. Let's look at the water experiment again. Writing derogatory words and putting it onto the crystallized water caused it to malform. The water that was ignored ended up looking like vomit. Okay? And how does that relate to us? Because how much are you of water? How much of you is water? 70 to 80%. Yeah. So don't go to either extreme. Don't play in and don't ignore. Instead, try something like this. I can see that you are in pain. And my prayer for you is that you recognize the resiliency that you have and the ability that you have to overcome the pain, to be happy again. And if you have something specific that I can do to support you, then please reach out to me. Know that I'm here. And anything other or less than that, saying, oh, I know it hurts, I know, I'm so sorry for you, I pity you. Pity is one of those words that causes derangement in the crystallized water. Because pity is not a positive word in any way, shape, or form. It's saying, well, I'm up here, and you're over there, and I don't want to be over there. I feel sorry for you. Versus compassion, which says, I can see your suffering. I don't even need to know why. And I can recognize your suffering because I've suffered too. And then you send the prayer for healing. And you support in whatever way is appropriate to the healing, but not to the ongoing drama. Yeah, we could have a whole session on that. I love that topic. I do. It's amazing and it's so complicated. And that's the way my mind works. That's why I love yoga so much. I just love yoga. I love yoga because I love this relationship to everything. And the ability to see the divine and the sacred in everything. And it doesn't mean that I'm good at it or that I'm perfect at it. I'm not at all. But I love working with it. And I love the realization that it brings to me. Even in moments where I know I'm struggling and I'm fighting myself and I'm causing my own suffering. Even in those moments, because I can still say, And this is largely because I have a consistent practice. I can still say, I recognize that you're caught in a behavior right now that is your pattern in this life. So let's just breathe for a while and see what kind of realizations come to the surface. And then, if they're useful, let's work with them. Sometimes we need to have a little bit more of an interaction, but for us in our life, in most of our relationships, and I'm not talking about psychological, significant psychological issues. We're not talking here about abuse issues. We're not talking about forgiving the person who murdered a loved one. Those are conversations to be had, and we can have those conversations right in line with your handout. But for today's talk, what we're focusing on is your relationship with you first, because that's where your spring cleaning comes in. You got to clean out your own closets and stop worrying about what other people have in there. You probably don't want to know anyway. Because if you look in there, you may be compelled to try to clean it out, and then you won't clean your own. You ever do your friends' dishes? Such an act of kindness. It is such an act of kindness, unless you're not doing your own. Yeah. All right, time for one more comment, and then we'll have to end for today. Everybody good? Yes. Well, actually, let's hear.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah.
I'm interested in how accepting you are of the mind. I've been thinking a lot about I've kind of been piecing apart mind from emotions, from soul or energy, and that communication with source. And you talk about kind of a relationship between the mind and whatever knowing you have. I think I have a very hard time sitting with my feelings.
Mm.
I like to default to the mind, and the mind, you used a word earlier and talk about how hostile the mind can be sometimes towards the feelings or the self or the body or the experience.
Yeah. So in yoga, we look at the mind as a bit of a hindrance sometimes, and something that shouldn't be invested in too often. We have the mind, which is some component or relationship to the ego, and then we have consciousness. And consciousness can be found in the mind, but the mind is not present in consciousness, if that makes sense. So they're two different levels completely. When we're in the mind, we can have a healthy relationship, absolutely, but we have to rewire the patterns of the mind. Where we might be a reactive person, we need to, or we could if we choose, to rework ourselves so that we become less reactive compassionately, less reactive, not through force. And then what that does is it opens up a flow of energy. And the energy that is now able to flow with less obstruction feeds into the consciousness coming forward, the one who is witnessing, the part of the self that knows the truth of love. That becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. It was never weak. It was just kind of not our priority, And so, but it becomes a priority more and more and more. And the more that aspect of our consciousness that knows the truth of love becomes our priority, the less we pay attention to the mind, the less we invest in its storytelling. And then that opens us up to an even deeper relationship, which opens us up to even more space. Now, within that space, we function as a biological person because we're in a physical body. But we're not gnarled up. We're not twisted and contorted via our unregulated emotions and guilt. Instead, we're walking straight forward, or sitting straight up, or lying down, whatever posture we happen to be in, And the experience of being there is the relationship with that. That there's a full awareness, or at least a fuller awareness than what there was previously. And it means that I can now move from a place of saying this whole life, head hanging down, looking only down. This whole life is a burden. Nothing good ever happens to me. Life is just, this, that, and the other thing. Everybody else is wrong. Nobody understands me. To looking up and saying, I understand that I have those feelings sometimes. Everybody does. But man, it's beautiful today. I don't need to play into those feelings because I know they're not true. I know they're just a record playing over and over and over again. And all I have to do is take the little record needle and move it to the next track. And the next track is, man, it is beautiful today. How can I serve you today? How can I be present for you today as well as be present for myself? How can I walk through this world today not harming anybody? Yeah, it's powerful. And then that brings you into that deeper relationship, which plays on itself. Does that answer a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very good. So let's sit up nice and tall, and we'll close the eyes. They usually come in about now and say, Sudha, family yoga's going to start. And so we'll close the eyes, and we'll just begin our spring cleaning. Or continue, I should say. Continue our spring cleaning. And so breathing in, know that you are receiving the gift of life, the gift of love, the gift of peace and contentment. That as you breathe in, you are receiving these things from that divine source. You are receiving the experience of being. And as you breathe out, you are lightening your load, detoxifying your body, letting go of outdated beliefs and stories. You are living the contract of being. You are living the gift. Awake, aware, and in love. I'm placing the right hand on the heart and the left hand over the right. And together we'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a nice breath in. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere find peace, love, light, and happiness. May all beings know their oneness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste. Thank you all so much for being here today. So good to see and meet each and every one of you. So there's lots to do today, so I hope that you stay and enjoy. They're serving lunch if you haven't already, or if you have and really liked it and want seconds. That's typical, right? I hear that chocolate pie is very good. And then there's all types of things that are happening on the schedule. So, and there's schedules posted all over the walls that you can find as you're walking through. So enjoy the day. Good. And please don't forget to support the ashram. We're here for you. We're here for the community. And we are typically by donation with many of the things that we offer out there. And we can only continue to do this through your generosity. So thank you so much for supporting us. Namaste.